Right, so today we're going to be working on our cinder block. So let me go ahead and set my project back to my demo cinder block. And so my cinder block, where we last left off, should hopefully have your UV mapping process done. So all of my shells have been planar mapped and projected and unfolded. Should also have your UV layout done, so that would mean that the squares on the checker map are matching in size, so that when you have your material assigned, which is the other thing you should have done, it will apply evenly across all of the faces on your cinder block. So currently I have my cinder block UVs done. I have a blend material attached to my object. That blend has the diffuse cinder block texture attached to it. So today we're going to work in Photoshop and follow the procedural steps that I gave you folks in the actual notes on what to do to create a cinder block, a bump map and a specular map, and we're going to use our cinder block texture to do that. So let me go into my copy and delete the files I made in my last period. Okay. So I'm going to open the cinder block texture, and I'm just going to drag it to Photoshop icon on the dock, and that will open it automatically. You can obviously go to File, Open, and open the file, the old-fashioned way. So I have my file. Now, if we're looking at our UV4 notes, how can you procedurally create a simple bump map from a given diffuse map? So we're starting with our color map. We're going to convert that into a bump map. So open the file. I'm going to go to the filter menu, down to the other filters, and then run high pass with a filter size of 2 pixels. So filter menu, other, high pass, and then it'll give you this little box. I've already done this today, so it already knows I want a value of 2. So I'm going to just hit OK on that. So that's it. Bump map is done. Okay, I've clamped my values to be around 50% gray with minor variations in either darker or lighter directions to add some roughness. So I'm done with my bump map. So File, Save As. Again, you should always be saving in the source images of your current project, or generally I should say. Cinder block. Now this is our bump map, so it's the cinder block _B. And I'm going to hit save on that. Now, one of the last, before I zoom in on that. So the last thing on here, save as a 24-bit targa. So make sure your file format in the save as dialog is set to targa. 24 bits per pixel. This will, if your file or if your model becomes randomly transparent when you assign a material, 99 times out of 100, it's because you made a mistake and assigned a targa file that is 32 bits per pixel. And the only difference between those two is that the 32 bits per pixel targas have transparency information. And if you don't put anything in that alpha channel, it thinks your model is supposed to be transparent. So your model will just become sort of transparent and see-through. So make sure you're using 24 bits per pixel. Hit OK. All right, and I can close this. So my bump map is done. So if I flip back into here, I have my object selected in object mode. I can go down here to material attributes. So it's pulled up my blend again. And I'm just going to assign my bump map now. So add the file node. Now, quick reminder about the main bump node here. It controls 2 things. Your bump value, which is the texture we're applying. That defines what the bumpiness should be for each face on a pixel by pixel basis using your texture. And then you have the bump depth, which is the multiplier. How strong is the effect of this texture? So in my case, I'm just going to skip that, go forward into my bump value, and assign my cinder block B as my bump. And so now if I get close, you see all this noise and ridges and such in the stone texture. So now our next texture is to create a specular texture, which is to define how shiny this rock will be. So if you take a look at, in fact, you can mildly see specularity with the default Maya global illumination lights. But just for sake of making things easier for you folks while I'm trying to teach this to you, I'm going to just put a light in here. I'm going to hit 7 to activate lighting, which is not something we've talked about. Okay, so now if I come down here and rotate around my brick, you can see how there's a uniform sheen across the top of this brick. So cinder blocks are typically not this shiny. So let's go define our specular color or our specularity. So doing spec maps, instead of essentially one step, it's 3 steps. First one, we want to open our diffuse map. So again, we want to start with our basic cinder block texture. All right, so back to the basics. Next step tells us here, image menu, adjustments, and then desaturate, and this will remove any color that is in our image. Now in our case, it looks grayscale. There is a slight bit of orange-ish light just from the sunlight that this was taken in. Desaturate it, and cool. So now we're certain that this is only grayscale, black and white info. Now we're going to use an adjustment layer levels, which we can assign using our adjustment layers panel, which is right above your layers by default. So second one from the left is levels, and that creates a levels layer down here in our layer panel. And all we need to use this levels layer for is to tweak our tonal range. So if you look at the histogram that it populates for us, this histogram is a graph of the tonal value of each pixel in this document by default. So what it looks like at its base. So as you can see, I mean, it's a pretty light looking cinder block. So most of our tones are lighter than 50% gray and closer to white than they are to black. In fact, I'd say mathematically most of them fall in like the 65-70% gray category. So what we want to do is we want to constrain our tonal range so that we have a lot of dark tones and a few areas of very bright whites. And so that would represent little minerals that are in the cinder block that would be catching light, because not the whole thing's not going to be uniformly sheen. We want to see only little bits catching the light. So I'm going to start by pushing the black tab way far to the right. And so the black tab being this far over is saying any of these tones that were originally, let's say, in the middle, now any tones that are to the left of this tab are going to be shown as pure black in here. And by the same token, I don't have any pure white, but I'm going to push this tab far to the left and make some of these tones become pure white. So anything to the right of this becomes pure white. And then we got the 50% gray that I'm going to push quite close to my white, because again, you can see it's making the majority of my texture black. And then a little bit of gray, and then some highlighted white points. So we got before, after. All right, and so I'll do File, Save As on that one. This one, change the format to Targa. Make sure that you're always using a Targa format. It's just it's less compressed. That's the only thing that Maya likes about it, is less compression, better looking textures. So cinderblock _S, so I know it's my cinderblock spec. Hit save, 24 bits, and OK. Now, I can close this. No, I don't need to save this. And then in Maya, so I'm going to select this again, go to my material attributes, and let me move this over here. My telepresence folks, you won't see me zoom in, I don't think. I don't think my default Mac zoom works with WebEx. So I have a blend type material, which is key because only blends or fongs, other types of materials too, but the two that I'm recommending you use, blends and fongs, have specular shading, which is shininess. And so we're defining a specular color. So that is where you're going to assign your file node. And so again, let's take a look at this before I add the texture. Now you can see as I rotate around, there's no uniform sheen across this rock. As I rotate back and forth, hopefully you can just see how now there's much more patchy. Here, let me zoom in. Here, I'll do it from. So as I rotate around, some of those high points on my bump map are catching extra light as well. So that would be it. I have the light. I got this from rendering. It's a spotlight. 7 activates lights if you want to mess with that. Otherwise, you will be a-okay, 100% done with just a cinder block, properly UV mapped and laid out, and then your material will have all 3 channels assigned with a texture, color, bump mapping, specular color, which will be connected to cinder block B, and cinder block S in your project folder. So that is a completed UV3. UV345 should have the cinder block file in your project, and then the material assigned to that object in your file should have all 3 of your textures assigned to the right channel in there, as well as the proper texture files in the source images folder. Essentially what I'm saying is I should set your project, open the cinder block, and be able to see a textured cinder block with the proper textures applied without doing anything else. That's the game plan. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. Thanks for watching.